Hi, welcome back to my studio. Today's day 2 of this lesson, and today what we're going to do is we're going to be throwing in some detailed foam up on the wave, some coming down here across the beach itself, and we're going to throw in some spray back here just to give a little more action to the wave falling. So the first thing we need to do is grab your rat brush, and I'm going to grab the real small rat brush here. You can use a medium-sized one if you want, or the small one like I've got, and grab a little bit of liquid. And we're going to grab some of the ultramarine blue. Okay, now when the waves coming across like this, it's going to have a spray that sprays over, and that's what we're going to paint back here, is the back spray before it turns into the foam. So what we're going to do is we're going to go right along the edge of our water line right here, and we're just going to take our rat brush and go right up to there and just shoot it up like that. And not all the way across, a couple of spots, and then leave a couple more open. And we're just going to do something like that, give a little break, and some more. And you just want to shoot it up till it trails off to nothing up at the top. Just kind of like that. But you want to start it right at the bottom of that wave breaking. And grab a little bit more liquid, a little bit more of that ultramarine blue. And we're going to do the same over here. And just grab it and just drag it up like that. Just like a little spray. Give a little break. And you don't want to do it on every spot. You want to leave some breaks. It makes it a little more natural. Okay, clean off your brush. Then we're going to take our big dry 3-inch brush and we're going to smooth that out into nothing, just like we smoothed all of this out here. So just get it, just knock it back. Again, I'm just doing it very lightly, and just bring it up first, and then knock back on the top part if it needs to be. Now keep in mind, the more that you hit this, the more it's going to fade out on you. So if there's some detail that you want to keep, just lightly hit it and just leave it alone. Other areas you might want to grab and smooth out a little bit more. Other areas you might want to leave. Just like that. Now it gives a little appearance of the wave. You can see the spray coming back there. Okay, the next part we're going to start putting in detailed foam. This was done with the rat brush. So it was kind of basically thrown down with the rat brush making its own little detail. Now we're actually going to control that detail. We want to put detail down, but we want to control it. Not let the brush do where it wants to go. We want to control where the abstract is. And to do that, we need a liner brush. Now this liner brush, it's real long and it's real thin. Usually it's a watercolor brush, and what it's meant for is when you're drawing down lines like a long, thin line, this will give you that long, thin, skinny line all the way down. Rather than the fat brush, it'll go a little ways and you'll run out of paint. This will hold a lot of paint for a long distance. And it's made just for that, for lines, for long lines. However, in our case, we're going to do it a little differently. Instead of painting, we're actually going to be pushing it and sideways. And again, as we're pushing it sideways, that paint that's on there is going to jump and sputter. Kind of like what we just did here. But this is going to be a little bit more controlled. So we're going to take that and we're just going to drag our foam that we're pushing up into whatever direction, and then we're going to kind of connect the dots, if you will. You'll see what I'm talking about in a minute. Okay, get a little paint thinner on there to get it kind of wet. You don't want it real wet, but you want it damp. So basically I'd come in, put some paint thinner on it, and then I just kind of blotch it a little bit so that it's damp on there. Okay, now first ones we're going to put in some foam coming up on the wave. And you don't just put it straight up. Usually there's a curve to it. It comes up and it curves around the wave and then it comes back down. So we're going to follow that pattern throughout. We're going to be pushing it around this way. So again, a little bit of paint thinner, possibly a little bit of liquid. You want it pretty wet, not too sticky. And now what we're going to do is, because we want it lighter than this part here, we want it lighter than the dark blue, but we want that foam coming up. When you have a wave that's shining through, that water right there is so thin you can see through it. Any foam that's on top of it is actually darker. If you look at photographs, it's not white unless light is shining on it. Well, the light is back here, so this is the dark side of the wave. So that foam that's coming up is actually going to be dark on this light part, yet it's going to be lighter than the dark water back here. So we need a color that's going to be in between the two here. We don't want green, but we want it blue, but we want it to be lighter than this. So the best way to check that is just get your palette knife, grab a little bit of color. Let's say we're going to use this color, and just hold it up to that. Now you can see that that is actually lighter than this dark part, but when we come up here, it's going to be darker than that green. That's exactly what we want. So what we're going to do, take our liner brush, again, get it a little bit wet, maybe even with some liquid in there, and we're going to grab some of that paint that's right there. Now you want it fairly wet, but not real runny. You want it kind of like that. And now again, we're not going to be painting it, not at this point. We're going to drag our foam up and let it dry out, just like this. We hit this part and let it fade into nothing on its own. We're going to do the same thing with this liner brush, but we're going to do it sideways, not pointed like this, and not pushing it. We're going to drag it sideways. So we're going to come up with our foam here, and just a little bit of pushing, and again, we're coming up kind of like, just like that. We're going in that circular motion. Okay, grab a little bit more paint thinner, a little more liquid, and we'll come back in here again. And again, just kind of juggle your brush a little bit back and forth and drag it back down. And you're controlling now the foam, and you're controlling that abstract that was up here. Instead of the brush controlling it, now we're controlling it, how we want to move it. And the whole key to this is, like most everything else, is pressure. The more pressure you put down, the fatter you're going to get, like here, and you'll get a little less pressure and you get more refined as a point. So again, let's go up in this area and just push. Now you don't want to go on top of this foam, because all this undercurring foam is underneath this foam on top. So make sure you don't go on that white part. And you can also come back down with it here, just kind of like that. And again, give some breaks. Don't do this throughout the whole thing. It gets monotonous. We have a bunch here, so we're going to leave the space. Maybe we'll come back over here and grab a little bit more underneath that, like this. And grab some over here. Again, use the side of the brush. So you have I'm using the side of it, and that'll give you that jagged edge. Let's just go up here. And we'll grab some more over here. And maybe a little bit more over there. And maybe just one more over in this spot right here. Okay. All right, now that we've got the basic lay down, now we take a look at it and go, okay, what can I make out of this? So now I see this part up here. I got a thick part, another thick part, and it's kind of blotchy here. So now what I do is I'll take the same thing again, just like I was going to lay it down, only instead of dragging it, now I am going to paint it, because I'm going to be what I call like connecting the dots. I like this part, but there's nothing really in between, and I want it to be all one big moving foam. So what I'm going to do is come in here, and I'm going to just drag it just as a point thing, make contact like this. And then down at the bottom we get a little bit thicker. and I can come back in, do a little one maybe, and just let your imagination have wild. So now you can see we're starting to look like foam. We've used the abstract we laid down, and we're refining it. We're coming in and connecting all the dots. And we're going to do that throughout the whole deal. Also up in here, we want a little bit showing, so we'll probably just draw a little bit, say like that, coming back down into this area. Again, don't do too much. You want to leave some open space in here too. You don't want to just saturate it with foam, then it's going to look bad. All right, over here, you can come in, maybe do that. And maybe over here we got nothing. I'm going to put a little bit more. See, now we're actually taking control of it. Just like that. Okay, I'll leave that there. And let's come back in here. And like I say, now when I'm doing this, I'm not dragging it, I'm using the tip of it like it's designed to be as a liner brush, and we're just making lines in between the blotches we have to connect them all like this. And we'll do a little bit more over here. Okay, once we've got that kind of laid in, now again, take your big brush, and this is what we're going to do now is, again, very lightly, we're going to go over the wet area we have right now, and we're going to knock it all down into one intense color. Because right now it's kind of thin in some areas and thick in other areas. We want it all to look like one big blending, and that's what this brush will do. So we just hit it very lightly, and you can see how it's softening that down and turning it all into one intensity. And again, if there's certain areas that you want blended more, just use your edge of the brush, just kind of knock them back a little bit more, just to make it look natural. Okay. Same thing on this side. You want to just knock it back lightly at first, then once we see what we have, then we might want to blend it a little bit here, a little more, a little bit over there. But remember, the more that you stay in one spot and the harder you hit, the more you're going to take that detail out. So there's some areas you want to knock back and make them blend into nothing. Other areas you want to leave that detail to show the foam that we're using. Okay. Now we're going to start coming down into this area down here. Now, we have our light source up here, and it's hitting this wave. This wave on this part of it is in the shadow, so that's why we use the darker blue to come into here, because the light is not hitting it. As that wave comes down, now we're going to start seeing it, the light's going to hit it. So now we want to do the foam, but we want to do it in white, because the light's going to be hitting that part of it. So the same deal, we just take our liner brush, grab some white paint, thin it down pretty good. You don't want it thick at this point. Just get it pretty thin. Use a little liquid, or I use some paint thinner just to get it down pretty thick or thin. Okay, now we're going to come back in here and just do this, kind of the same thing. We can drag a little bit up here if we want to. Just not all the way up, because this is going to be in the shadow, but down here where it's just starting to touch it. We want to hit maybe a little bit in there. And again, we're going to knock this back, so any rough parts will all get smoothed out. We're just trying to show the difference between the light part and the dark part of that foam. And same thing up in here. Okay, we can come in, drag up a little bit. Okay, the same thing with this here. Grab up. Okay. Now again, we want to come in and kind of connect our dots. So we've got something going on here, but maybe we want to come in a little bit more up there. Just kind of like that. Maybe that. And again, be conscious of your shape. You want this to show as a wave. So when you're coming down to this area, like I'm going up where the wave is curling, but when I come back down, now I'm hitting the flat side where it's on the beach area. So as it comes back down, now if I do anything down in here, I'm going to be going this way with it rather than that way, because the water's coming down and then it's laying flat. So again, maybe come up here, drag that down, and now it's going to go flat. And we just continue that right out throughout the piece. Again, don't go too high because that's underneath the shadow there. And again, just connect your dots however you feels good to you. And don't get too carried away putting too much white down here. Otherwise you have no more detail, then it's just a white blob. We don't want that either. Okay. And this part. All right. And let's go over here. Let's connect on here. Okay, that should look pretty good. Now again, take your big dry brush here, make sure you got it cleaned off. There's none of that other paint that's on there. And we're just going to knock this back just like we did with this area here. Okay, once we got a head start, now we start taking a look at it to say, okay, I need to blend this a little bit more. And again, I'm just using the tip. Just blend that out a little bit. Maybe leave that. This needs to be blended a little bit more up in here. And now you can see how it's actually looking like real foam. Same thing on this side here. Just knock it back a little bit just to get one even tone out of it. And once we knock it back some, then we take a look at it and see what we like, we don't like, and just start blending accordingly. All right. Okay. Now we're going to move on down to the next part down here. We want to put probably just one more where the water's crashed down and now we're starting to spread out this way. Let's put in one more before we come down with the final one. Again, the same way, we're going to use our liner brush. Grab a little bit of white paint. Get it fairly thin. You don't want it too watery where you put it down and it just dissipates out to nothing in here. But you want it pretty wet so you can move it along and you don't get a little bit and you have to come back and keep getting paint. You want it so you can get a pretty good line going. After a while you get the feel of the paint on the brush and you can feel just how wet it is and how not wet it is to lay down. Alright, so let's just say we're going to come up here and we'll just come and throw in some foam going down there. Alright. And we'll grab a little bit more. And again, foam breaks up. It's not an even line that's going to be across here. So when you're laying it down, you know, you're going to have thick spots and you're going to have thin spots. It comes up, it comes down, just kind of like that. Whoop. All right. Okay. And let's continue this out here. Maybe we'll make this a little bit thicker. So now I'm kind of dragging it across. Rather than painting it, I'm dragging it because I want a little bit thicker line there. Okay. And now again, well, let's just start kind of connecting the dots. What we like, we want a little bit more here, put it there, just controlling that flow. Now again, take our big brush and we're going to knock it back. And again, don't hit it too hard, it will lose what we've got down there. We just want to soften it down so that it doesn't look like wet paint on here. So we're just going to knock it down just to get an even tone across all of that white we just laid down. Very lightly. Now for the top part over here where we have a little thicker foam going on, we've got this big wave crash, and then we've got a line where it's already hit, and this is a white foam, and then we've got a thinner light white foam. We want to get some white highlights on here like we did up here. So for that, again, grab your rat brush, grab some of that white now, because we used this color before, and now we're going to grab some white for the highlights. And I'm just going to go on the edge of that, just a little bit. And now we're going to be more painting it than actually pushing it, because we want to use the point of this rat brush to kind of make our distinction. Okay. And just go right along with it. Okay. And again, you don't want to make just a thin line just on top of everything going right across, because that's not natural. You know, the foam is going to be hit in certain areas, and some areas you're going to have more white hitting it, and in other areas you won't. So it's kind of broken up. But now we're using the point edge of the rat brush to give ourselves a little bit more control of exactly how we want this to look. Okay. Alrighty, and let's grab a little bit over here. Alright, then once again, take your big brush, and we're going to soften that down like we did everything else over here. This foam is very soft, and you want to keep it that way. So now we need to take this, just knock it back lightly. Again, that's the whole key to this. Do it real lightly and just feel it. There's certain areas you want to blend more, then just stay in that area, and you get more of a smoother blend. But it's always best to hit it light as possible at first, because otherwise if you hit it too hard right off the bat, you'll lose whatever detail you might have down there. So again, just real lightly here so we see what we've got. Then we can hit it just a little bit more. And now it's starting to take a foam shape of actual foam. Okay. Now we're going to come down, and we've got a wave breaking. It's hit the bottom. We've got this foam. We have another line of water down here where the water's starting to go back perhaps. Now we're going to put down some foam here that is real thin. The water you can see the beach underneath it, but it has that foam where it crashed down and now it's starting to curl back again. So to do that, again, take your liner brush, get it fairly wet, just like before. And now first off, we're just going to draw where we want our water line to come down. So I'm going to say we're going to come down here, maybe down that way, up a little bit, and maybe down here, up, over, and we're just going to fade it out to there. Maybe like that. Okay, now we have an idea of where we want that water line to come down. Now from this point on, we're just going to take and we're just going to shove it back, kind of like we hit the part here and shove that back up into the sky to win it to nothing. We're going to do the same thing with this water line, only instead of with a wrap brush, we're going to take this where we control how that comes back in. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Again, take some white here, and let's just say we're going to start over here. I want this to be, I'm dragging it thick, and then I'm just going to be fading it back a little bit. Again, come up in this area and just kind of dragging it. Okay, the same thing with this. Now again, remember, everything is abstract, so there's no straight line, there's no solid, so to make it look real, you're not going to have everything's going to be thick coming up here. You're going to give it some kind of a break where it's just not quite as thick, you know, maybe even thinned line, and then come back into a thick area again. Okay? And again, we're just going to be dragging it right back, kind of out to where it came from. The only thing you want to be conscious of is you want a smooth line down here. So you don't want that rough part coming on this side. So make sure you always start down in this area and then move it up however you want to on that side. Okay, and we're going to do that right across this whole area. Now for this front part, I'm going to make this a little bit thicker right in this area. Again, not across the whole thing, but I want this part to be a little bit thicker. So I'm going to come in and hit this one part of the wave real thick. So we're just going in here. Again, we're going to knock all this back like we did with that to make it nice and smooth, but right now we just want to show our shape. Okay. Again, we want to keep this front fairly soft on here. This part needs to be jagged, this part needs to be nice and smooth. keep this fairly smooth on the front part of that. Back here we can get kind of ratty, but up there we want to keep it fairly smooth. Let's finish off the other side here. Now there's going to be some foam. When foam comes back, it's not all just in the front. There's other areas that are up here. So we might want to put in like a little blob over here, maybe a couple over here, and then just kind of connect the dots with that. Just make sense of what we're laying down. Again, don't get too carried away with this. You know, we want to show some foam that's on here to give us some depth, but we don't want to cover it with complete foam all across. You know, leave some, put some areas like this in, and then other areas like here, leave that blank. Just a little bit more, perhaps. Okay, now we just knock all that back again, just to keep it a nice even tone across all that white. And again, real lightly. We don't want to lose any detail at this point. We may want to later on after we see what we've got. But the first thing is just to get a nice even tone of what we have down here. And that's just hitting this real lightly, just to knock it back a bit. And that'll smooth it all out into an even tone. Okay, once we see what we've got, then we can take a look at it and say, okay, well, you know, I like this area here. This needs to be back a little bit more. Maybe this needs to be knocked back a little bit more. Fade that out into nothing there. And I'm just using the edge of this brush, just hitting it, just to knock back the areas that I want to be blended a little bit softer and a little less intense. Alrighty. Now what I want you to do is we're going to take a break here. We're going to let this dry, and once this painting dries, what I want you to do is draw in a rose. We're going to have a rose coming down here to draw in any rose that you want, or you can use the rose that I have on my picture. Just put in a rose down here. We don't want it too big, pretty much proportionate like I have on the picture there. But put in whatever kind of rose you want, draw it in with pencil, and tomorrow when we come back in, we're going to take some Payne's Gray, and we're going to hit the bottom parts of a lot of this foam to give it that shadow where foam comes over and there's a little bit of a shadow line on that water. That'll pop this out big time, as well as the edge of this, and then we'll put in the rose here. Once that dries, we'll put in the shadow on the rose on the beach as well, and maybe we'll put in a couple of seagulls up here just to make the piece look fine. So that's it for today, and we'll see you tomorrow. Hi, welcome back to my studio. Today we're going to finish our painting up here. We're going to be putting in some Payne's Gray down here for a little shadow, which will pop this foam on the beach here. We're going to put some Payne's Gray on this area of the foam, again to give that a little more definition, as well as this one back here. We're also going to be laying in our rose, and then we're going to put in a couple of seagulls up here, and that'll be pretty much it. So let's get started. First thing we want to do is we want to grab some Payne's Gray. Just grab a little bit of it. And we're going to take our flat brush and a little bit of liquid and some Payne's Gray. Now you don't want to get it too wet, but you do want it not just dry right out of the tube. It'll be hard to move that. With liquid, it makes it nice and smooth. So let's just go right along our edge here. Just follow that edge right along there. Again, make sure you grab some liquid because we want to smooth this out. We don't want a hard line like this. But with the liquid, when we have that with the Payne's Gray, it'll smooth out real nice, just like we did with the rest of the painting. And again, let's grab some of this. Just right along the edge there. All right. Okay, once we have it laid in, clean your brush off really good. Make sure you got it as dry as possible here. The drier the better, because we're just going to be grabbing some paint down and just giving a head start to the blending part here. And again, if you're getting too much of that paint off of there, that means your brush is too wet. Just come back and try to dry it off some more. And we don't want a real heavy line. Some of it's going to be a little wider than others. We just want to give a little head start here on some of that blending. And even on the edge here, rather than having a sharp edge, I would take this, if your brush is working right and it's really dry, take that and smooth that up into the foam a little bit too. We want to get just a darker shade of foam here as well, because it is in the shadow. Again, move a little bit up on the foam so it's not a real sharp edge there. And then make sure you keep your brush clean and dry. And then all of this, instead of a solid line here, we want to blend that right down. And we just move that right along the whole area. Same way. Okay, and come back in, take your smoothing brush, and just, again, you're just kind of rubbing it at this point here. You just want to soften that down. And if there's some area like here where it's a little bit too much, you just come in and just keep hitting that until you blend that right out. You just want to give a little pop here. Okay, and make sure your brush is dry. Like I said, the drier the better on this here. And we'll just grab some more of this paint off it and just move right along. We just don't want we don't want a sharp edge on our shadow here. We want it to be nice and soft, just like a regular shadow would be, where it just blends out to nothing here. Just kind of like that, and then come back with your brush again and just smooth it out. Like I say, just cup some areas that might need a little bit more. We just want a little bit of a shadow here. Now it pops that a little bit more off of the canvas. And we're going to do the same thing with this part up here, and we'll do the same thing over here. So again, take your brush, grab a little bit of liquid, a little bit of Payne's Gray, and we're just going to go right along the bottom. Clean it off again. You don't want any of that liquid and Payne's Gray on there. You want it pretty well clean. And then just keep blotting that out to try to get it as dry as you can. Like I said, the drier this brush, the better. And then just start grabbing some of that away from there. Starts getting a little too wet, again, just dry it off, just picking up too much paint, and just come back in again. It just gives a little more definition to it. And we're going to do the same thing up in here. Now in this one here, Your foam probably looks a little different than mine, but I'll tell you what I'm doing with mine, and you can apply the same principle to yours. See, I've got a lot of foam going here, and then it comes down to nothing. And then the same thing on this side. It's real thin, and then it's a whole lot of foam, and then down to nothing here. So I'm going to lay down the Payne's Gray. I want most of it to be down here. Maybe even some of this thin parts because it's further back. I may not even put any Payne's Gray up at this point. But I want a little bit over here because this is where this thicker foam is, and there would be a shadow there. So again, grab a little of your liquid, a little bit of Payne's Gray. Again, you don't want too much, and that's about where my foam really is. I'm going to end it right about there. Do a little bit more. And like I said, come in here. And that's about where I'm going to end it, right about there. Okay, and then I'm just going to work this in a little bit. Again, you just don't want a hard edge. You want it to be, you know, softer to where it just blends really nice away from that where it's hitting down there. And that just gives a little bit more pop. Okay, I think on this piece we have some of the foam that's coming up here and we're hitting the wave, and then we've got coming down into this layer of foam, and then we've got this extra little wave that's coming back into the water as it's pulling out. But we don't have any foam here, so I think what we'll do is we're going to grab the same principle that we did here with our liner brush and just using it sideways to get some foam. But keep in mind now, this right here, we're looking at water, so we're looking at it on almost on a flat surface. The wave is coming up and we're looking right at it on here. This part down here, we're on a horizontal plane. So our foam, although we'll see it, it won't be flat. We're not going to drag it flat up here because we're not looking at it flat. We're looking at it on a horizontal. So most of our foam that we're going to be laying down is going to be going this way rather than dragging it up this way. So let's grab our liner brush. Grab a little bit of liquid and maybe some paint thinner if you want. Thin that down a little bit more. And we're going to grab some of our white paint. Oh, a little dry. Just keep mixing it up until you get a nice flow. You don't want it real wet so that it's too watery, but you don't want it thick where it's going to drag too much either. Now we're going to take this foam, and again, like I said, we're going to be moving up here back to this, but a lot of this is going to be this way rather than dragging it up because we're not looking at it flat. So let's grab some of this foam here and maybe come in here just a little bit. Just kind of wiggle it back and forth, moving into that foam area. And again, don't do it throughout the whole thing, kind of like we did here, but instead of it dragging it flat because we're looking more down on it here, this is more of a horizontal, you're going to be going more this way with it. And so I've got some foam here. I might leave a break. And maybe grab this over here, maybe just shove that in. Maybe a little bit more over here. Again, keep everything pretty much going this way because we're looking at it horizontal at this point. So you can drag it across to get a break if you want, like I did here. And we'll come back and put detail on that in a minute. So let's just go over here. Let's say we want to go big that way. So, and again, I'm still dragging the brush like we did here, but instead of dragging it up, I'm dragging it sideways because we're looking at our perspective is different. And I'm not going to hit everything, just every now and then. Okay. Now we come back in, and the same thing we did down here. Take a look at it and try to see what we've got going. Say, okay, we got a lot here. I want to maybe connect some of this over into there, so I'm making a nice thin line coming from this foam to that foam. Connect this up, maybe a little bit over here. And maybe a little bit more up in that area. Like I say, when you're doing this, you know, you can get carried away with it and just start laying down foam. Before you know it, it all looks the same and it's just a mess, and you got to take it out and start all over. So make sure you give some breaks. Like I've got a break here, I've got a break here. That's good. All right, so now I got some of this going. Again, if you notice my brush, everything is kind of going this way because of our perspective on this foam and the water that we're looking at. Okay, so once we lay that down, then again take our big brush, clean it off. We don't want any of this Payne's gray going on there. And you should only have, if there's any paint on this at all, on the very tip, because we're just smoothing it and it's a dry brush. So if you just clean off the tip, that's fine. That should keep it clean. And again, very lightly, because if you hit this hard and you stay in one spot too long, all that little detail we lay down, it's going to be gone. So just hit it very lightly, just to knock it back almost to the same tone. Actually, that's looking pretty good. Again, I'm doing this very, very lightly. Okay, I think that's pretty good. So now our next step would be to do the rose. So let's grab some of our green paint here. And we're just going to follow the line of the stem. So we're just going to come all the way down here. Okay, right into the red rose. Let's give it one more shot. Okay. And then I'm going to start putting in our leaves here. Just trying to get the basic outline of what we're doing here. We're going to come in with our flat brush and make that a little more solid. We're just trying to get the feel of what our actual leaf is looking like here. Now on these, because I'm going to be putting in some highlights, I'm not going to make them as solid as I had these here, because there is going to be some highlights on these leaves and I don't want to be fighting that too much. I'm just kind of getting an outline here. If we take this Viridian green and we mix it with a little bit of white, now we're going to start making it opaque. Now we start putting that color down. White always makes things a little bit more opaque. And grab a little bit of black on that. Not much. We don't want to get it too black and white. So now we've got an opaque color rather than a transparent color, which this Viridian green likes to be. And we need that solid color because, as you can see, we're starting to see through the leaves. We don't want that. So with a little bit of white, and we take some of that black to knock down the white so it's not a light green, and grab some more of this color. Mixing that all together will make your paint a little bit more opaque. Now when we grab this, and don't mix any of the liquid because that'll again thin it out and make it more transparent. We don't want that. Now we want to get a little bit of white and black mixed with it. And now when we start putting it in here, you can see we're starting to make it a little bit more opaque. It's not quite as transparent. Again, I'm leaving some areas open here because I'm going to be coming in with a lighter shade, and I don't want to be fighting the dark background that I'm putting in here as far as these leaves go. So I'm just putting in the darker shade, and I'm going to leave this lighter shade for blending in here. Stem just a little bit darker down here as well. Okay, now let's come in with our lighter green color here. We're going to start adding some of the highlights to this. Again, just follow the flow of the leaf itself. Just getting a little bit of a highlight on these leaves here. Maybe even just a touch up there, just for a little bit of detail. Now to take some more of that dark green. All right, a little bit more light green. We're going to grab some of our alizarin crimson, and we might want to add just a little bit of yellow to that, just for the highlight. And maybe I can grab a little bit of that yellow. I'm also going to grab some of this. I'm going to grab just a little bit of burnt umber, just because it's red and that black is making it a little too hard. So I want to grab a little bit of this just to soften that darkness down a bit. So now it's darker, but it's not that hard-edged black. And then we're going to grab our flat brush, and let's grab some of this medium red here. A little bit of that with some of this. We don't want it quite that dark, but we don't want it light at this point. We're on the bottom side of the rose here. So now let's grab this part. All right, now we grab that dark red and just come right in here with this part. Okay, now grab your detail brush. We're going to throw in a shadow down here, but the shadow we're going to put down is the same as this. We're going to put in some of the Payne's gray and throw the shadow down and smooth that out. And if we do it while it's wet right now, if you're real careful, you could come in and hit just the edge of that and not mess that rose up. But there's no real sense to that. Let the paint dry. Finish off the rose, any more little detail you want to put in there. Let the painting dry. Then when we put the Payne's gray down, when you're hitting that Payne's gray, if you go over a little bit, you're not going to be pulling that paint off of there. So let's let this dry one more day. We'll just hit that Payne's gray down here. Take us about 5 or 10 minutes, and we'll be all set. And we can get a couple of seagulls in here too. So we'll see you again tomorrow. Hi, well, welcome back. Today we're just going to finish up, put a little shadow on the rose here, maybe a couple of simple little seagulls, and we'll be done with the piece. So let's get started with this. Okay, so we're going to grab a little Payne's gray here. Get a flat brush, a little bit of liquid. And some Payne's gray. You don't want a whole lot of liquid. You don't want it too wet. Because Payne's gray is kind of transparent on itself. And we're just going to come in here and just start putting in where we want our shadow to be. And I'm just going to rough it in. This is a shadow. Now the main reason why I did this, to let it sit for another day, is so we can go right on top of like this leaf up here to get right in there. And you don't have to worry about dragging all that wet paint down on top of this canvas if we were painting wet on wet. Now we're painting it just dry on here, and we're actually just kind of rubbing some of that Payne's gray on top of there. It really makes it a lot easier. And again, if we made a mistake, we can always come in, clean off our brush, and take some of the part out. And it doesn't affect the painting, where if it was wet, we'd have a real problem with it. We're just kind of roughing it in, just about where we want it here. And let's just get some of that in. And this is just a shadow that's coming down from the sun up here, just hitting that rose. We'll smooth all this out in a minute. But we're just kind of roughing it in at this point. Alright, let's just grab a little shadow up here from this stem and go right on top of that foam. Okay, then we just take our smoothing brush and we just start smoothing it out. Now again, don't hit it too hard. You don't want to get rid of, any definition that you have on the edges here. Right now we're just getting it all smoothed out so it's a nice even tone of a shadow. And once we get that, then the edges where it comes down past here, let's hit that a little bit more to blend that out. Shadow is always a little more blurred out toward the end than it is right up against the image. Just want a little bit of a shadow here. Again, if you've got some darker areas, just keep hitting that until it fades out into a nice even tone right across the whole painting. And then we just have a nice little shadow going on there. And we can just grab some of this lighter blue that we had, and a little bit of that Payne's gray, just to gray it out a bit. We don't want it a solid blue. We want a little bit on the grayer side. And just grab some liquid. Some of that. And we're just going to put in a couple of real small little seagulls right here. Just like that. Maybe another one over here. And there we have it. Okay, so we're finished with the piece. Now the main thing I wanted to show you on here, although it took us a few steps to get to this point, in actuality it really is just a few hours to do a piece like this. But it wasn't so much of doing the painting. What I wanted to show you is the uses of certain brushes, like the liner brush, to use it sideways, and smoothing out certain areas with the big brush, and also how Payne's gray, you can use that for shadows, put that on as a after the painting is dry, and it's a lot easier than trying to do it wet on wet. So I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and we'll see you again next time.